Hi-Rez Studios design panel. We'll go ahead and get started. First question of the morning. You guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell us what you do at Hi-Rez Studios.
Sure. I'm Rory, or commonly known as Dry Bear, and I'm one of the game designers.
I'm Coleman Bryant, and I'm also a old school lead designer from Hi-Rez.
My name's Thomas Holt. I'm an art director at Hi-Rez.
Yeah. All right. One thing that people always ask, a question that always comes up, is what programs do you guys use at Hi-Rez? Like, what do you work with on a day-to-day basis? Can you tell us a little bit about, like, is there a particular program, or what do you do to do what you do?
Sure. Yeah, we primarily work with Unreal 3, so a lot of that just works through the engine there. As far as design work, we kind of use not that many programs. A lot of it's kind of going between a lot of people that work in different programs themselves or different departments and kind of being the go-between and also kind of driving how things get created. But as far as like specific program ourselves, specifically me anyway, we don't really use that many programs. More really just working through the engine that the game is built in.
Yeah, so I would echo that. Unreal 3 is our primary engine that we use for our PC games. So depending what side of design you're on, if you're in level design, you're pretty much in that all the time. You're placing all the assets and kind of moving around the collisions and the gameplay objects. But yeah, for God design and sort of high level, standard systems design, we're pretty much in spreadsheets. Yeah, email documents,
Google Docs,
like looking at rows of cells, and it's great.
So on the art side, we have awesome programs that we get to play with. Primarily it's 3D Studio Max, ZBrush, Photoshop. We kind of use the full gamut. But when it comes to design and as far as getting this stuff in, Unreal is kind of the full package. So it's a lot of time in the editor.
All right, so let's get into some origin stories. How did you guys get into gaming? How did you get into the game industry itself?
So gaming is kind of like something you're born with, I guess. Just since I was a kid, I always played games. And my path is a very atypical one. I actually came in as an entertainer and then moved on to be a caster and host, then moved on to be a community manager, then a product manager, and then a game designer. So at that point, it's kind of just like being very familiar with the game itself and kind of being, jiving well with the company and the direction of the games, and also kind of just having a good sense of how games are built and then kind of just putting elbow grease on it to make it all come together.
Yeah, so for me, also kind of same thing. I was born into games, basically. I remember one of my first memories was seeing a Nintendo game. I grew up with Nintendo and Super Nintendo and all that, and pretty much knew around, like, middle school, kind of started to realize, like, oh, people make these, like, that must mean it's somebody's job, like, oh, I want to make those someday, and then just kind of keeping eyes locked on that, and through high school, just tried to learn more about computers and art and just kind of all the things related to that. Went to Georgia Tech for computer science, and eventually got a couple internships in the industry, and the last of those was at Hi-Rez, and I stuck around there after I graduated.
So I kind of started, definitely as far as gaming, again, from the very early days, and as far as inspiration. And on the art side, I shared with the art panel. My mom, I remember just being really young, and she brought home a dot matrix printer paper, which is like, wasn't even being used then, but it's basically, paper that's all attached, and it has like the holes on either side, and you can basically stretch it out for days. And I would take it to the basement and basically pull it out and stretch it across the floor and design my own Mario and Contra levels and everything else, because it was perfect. You never ran into the end of the piece of paper, so your level could go as long as it needed to go. And so very early on, board student, School of Art, lots of drawing and going through. But actually, it was pure hobby. Like, it was never introduced to me as like an actual career path or something you can do. It was always like, oh, cool, art's something you can do on the side while you do something else to make money and earn a living. And so when I went to school, it was actually poli-sci, and I was going to be a lawyer. So I was pre-law, and
Thank God.
Yeah, exactly. So I did. And so it was my sophomore year when I kind of had that same realization, because till then, huge creature feature fan and everything else, but it was always a story of like the kid who like lived down the street from Tippett and just happened to walk into his garage one day, as far as how they got started or how they were doing that. And it seemed like if you didn't live in California, there was no hope to get into that kind of like field. And so I was sophomore year, Thanksgiving break, went home, and I was visiting my high school art teacher. And he had a program that had come in, a college program that was dealing with 3D animation. It was one of the first at the time premiere in the world. And they showed a clip from Jurassic Park, which is one of my favorite movies of all time, and then showed what they were doing. And it was just like 1-to-1. And I had my transfer papers filled out before I went back to school that week. So, and then from there, ended up with an internship with EA out in California. Spent like a decade on the West Coast, working with a bunch of studios and making a lot of games. And then finally was able to kind of come back home to the Atlanta area and make some games.
Very cool. Let's. What's one particular project that you worked on that gave you a challenge or something that was particularly like sticks out in your mind as I can't believe I got over that hump sort of thing?
So as far as things I can talk about, Smite is kind of like my main drain right now, and a lot of it comes down to really just more of the high-level kind of competitive mindset, and also making sure the game is balanced, which is a word that a lot of people like to use, which is a very challenging thing to strive for and one you never actually achieve. And a lot of it is really kind of making sure that the characters that you create and put into the game are something new and different. And since we're closing on, we're passing 65 gods in Smite right now. It's quite a lot, right? And no matter what you do, right, when you make a character in a game that has 65 other characters, there's going to be a lot of things that you've done before that you want to do something new for. So being different in that aspect is a little challenging, and a lot of it comes down to as well make sure the character is usable, because at the end of the day we make online competitive games, make player versus player games. So it all comes down to, do I want to play this against other players, and is it effective at doing that? And so everything comes down to items, experience, objectives on the map design itself, and how that feeds into how people move around the map and how that makes sense for a tournament. As far as like a specific project, one of the most recent I can mention is probably Apwash, who just got released about a month ago. And he was a big challenge for multiple aspects, actually. And one thing that people don't really consider when they look at games is a lot of it comes down to performance, too. And him summoning, up to 20, 30 ghosts on the screen at once, and also exploding corpses and throwing things all over the screen, this is a big performance concern. So it's kind of a blend between making sure that the character's fun, but doesn't make everyone lag when they play him, but also is very usable, can kill people, but isn't too strong at doing so. So balancing that was probably the most challenging thing I've done this year.
I would say for me, probably, I'm going to say Global Agenda, actually. So I've been around Hi-Rez since like end of year one, basically. And first games are always hard. And for those who followed Hi-Rez for a long time, Global Agenda was our first game. And we worked on it for like 5 years. And that was basically like all kind of in a box. Like we started doing some beta stuff like about a year before release. But, MMOs are a huge chunk to bite off. And there's a lot of work involved. And it was kind of like that tail end of like the height of MMOs as well. So that was just a lot of different kind of challenges, like learning the tech, breaking into the industry. Hi-Rez hadn't shipped a game before. We were building all our back end and all our server infrastructure and everything. So there was a lot of like those kind of technical challenges, and then also just like the personnel, keeping people like happy and interested when you're working on this thing in a vacuum for so long. It can be really challenging. And the biggest takeaway from that, I think, is just keep at it, because Global Agenda had a lot of cool ideas, and it was a neat thing, but it wasn't like a terribly successful thing. But then we did Tribes after that, and that was like so much better, and then Smite after that, and that's like really made us what we are today. So yeah, definitely the early days, just getting over that hump of learning all the tools and getting into it, and like building up your kind of your repertoire.
Yeah, generally, like game development, as I describe, is basically just it's problem solving, like day to day, in and out. Just it's every bit of it is that, and it's one of the things I love versus film and versus some of the other kind of mediums. Not that they don't have it, but it's just like you said, it's the complexity of the spider webs of the problems are so intense. And so it's tough to narrow it down to just one kind of major problem. But I will say, like, Smite has been very interesting. We launched the new Conquest map this year, and we're working to release the new Arena map. And it's definitely come with some challenges. We've basically built up the environment team within the last year as well. So as a people manager, just dealing with new people, trying to build a team and make sure that the right people are in the right roles, and how that kind of contributes. and kind of figuring that out while at the same time delivering to a live product that we put out content every 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So it has been a real challenge. But specifically the technical side, it's a game with it's live, it's on servers, it's worldwide, and so you want it to look as good as possible. You want to make sure that the art and the gameplay are kind of in perfect synergy, that you're doing the right things as far as like messaging and context, but the performance is really key. It has to run on a laptop in China, so it's a really big challenge to kind of push it as far as you can for the high-end user who has like a beast machine at home and wants to just see glorious pixels, as he's like playing and getting the full messaging and everything else. And then, the guy in China with the laptop to have that same experience, all to the best of his ability. So
you guys just told some really cool stories. What's one thing that, behind the scenes sort of that people don't know that happened that actually occurred during your design process that you think was particularly funny or interesting?
It's hard to summon stories like that. A lot of it, some people only see the end result, right? And so they don't really see the chaos that comes out when you're really struggling to try to make something work. And, Thomas is exactly right. A lot of it's just problem solving, right? And you get a lot of problems, a lot. And a lot of it comes down to, can you figure out what the right solution is in a very small time window? And so sometimes, some of our characters, people may not know this in Smite, but some of our gods were kind of, rebuilt in a day, or the day before they shipped, we changed everything. And, we really had to scramble. And you're not talking about 1 or 2 people. You're talking about several dozens of people that have to kind of go back and redo work. You're talking about animation, rigging, modeling, effects, programming, and also, making sure everything is clean when it comes out. So, and some of the struggles that we've had, what was probably one of the shortest ones? Chalk, I think, was
pretty quick.
The day before he shipped, we changed his entire kit.
Yeah.
The first arena was built over a weekend. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to say Smite itself, actually. It came from unexpected roots. So at the time, Hi-Rez was working on this game that we never actually completed called Tribes Universe, which we had announced. And that was before it kind of shifted into Tribes Ascend. And I was one of the people remaining on Global Agenda, kind of doing maintenance, keeping it alive, doing some expansion content. And I was the lead on it at the time. And Erez, who's the owner of Hi-Rez, the whole company basically, it was 2 days before Thanksgiving. And he's like, hey, I got this idea for this new mode. I want to try it out on Global Agenda. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds good. And I'd just driven into work that morning, and my car blew a cylinder on the way. So I was just not feeling oh, crazy new project, right before the holidays. Wasn't feeling super gung-ho at the time. And so he's like, no, it's okay. You can borrow my car. I'll take you back to my house, after tonight. I'll give you a car. No big deal. Because, he's he's a 100 millionaire. He's got a few cars, more than a few. He's got 2 garages. So, take it for that. But, so we, I borrowed his car, canceled my PTO for the next day, came into work instead, and started blocking out this sort of prototype for a level in Global Agenda that was a MOBA style map. So it was I took one of our old Capture the Robot maps, which was a CTF variant, and kind of shifted it, made 3 lanes out of it, put some giant turrets in there as towers, spawned a bunch of Commonwealth robots as minions, and just kind of made the beginnings of a MOBA map out of that. And we play tested it once, a few days later after the demo was kind of ready, and it was freaking fun. And so immediately pretty much decided okay, well, let's just make this its own game. And so we spun it off, and then we worked on that for a few months actually. And that was, it was cool. We were coming up with new classes and stuff. It was sci-fi kind of shooter MOBA, but started running into some issues with it just around kind of there's all these expectations of sci-fi, you have, miniguns and kind of rapid fire things, and you have sniper rifles, and there's all this kind of pacing sort of expectations from those kind of things, and especially since it was kind of Global Agenda universe, we had those weapons to work with as well. No jetpacks, but, and it was really challenging, again, sort of talking about how everything fits together. You're trying to make a MOBA, which is this game that's all about position and, sort of where you are, how far up the lane you are to the other guy, can you cut him off, you're hiding behind minions and stuff. And then you have these weapons that are just shoot a bunch of times, bunch of stuff blows up. Minigun with 100 rounds, sniper rifle that you think should have long range, and then, people are hitting towers from the distance. And we were just kind of like, this whole thing isn't working. Like, we just need to try something else, like, with this game type. And so then, we started pushing fantasy, and then Hi-Rez was like, oh, well, let's do mythology then. And then he had the name Smite, like, ready on that same day. And then we were like, yes, this is it. And so we rolled forward with that. But definitely very unexpected, but totally awesome, and it worked out great.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I'd say for me, like at least Hi-Rez, the Conquest map again when we were first developing it is something that actually a number of people got to play, and because we were having a LAN, actually some of the pros got to play and give feedback on, but we ended up like shifting it. Like it basically kind of turned like the initial design for Conquest, which I already shared on Twitter and everything else, so it's fine. I put up some concept and some old screenshots, but what a lot of people don't know is the new Conquest map, when we first designed it and developed it, we were looking very heavily at messaging and basically how to do navigation and do everything else, like just completely ground up for the third-person camera that kind of makes Smite different from the other MOBAs that are out there. And what we had was a map that, even though the layout and the basic collision was kind of the same, it was really heavily into architecture. And so there's a lot more buildings and everything else that's going through. And it's actually really fun to play. It's easy to navigate. It actually kind of added a certain level of, I'd say, stress or intensity to the battles, which I liked and stuff. But we play test every day. That's one of the things that we do, multiple times a day sometimes. We run multiple builds. We play test every day. And so very early on, while in Gray Box, we were play testing it. And while I think the feedback was that people liked it and they enjoyed it, it just didn't feel like Smite, which was kind of tough, especially considering Conquest is kind of our core mode. It's kind of the identity of Smite. And so changing that was seen as not necessarily the best thing. So I'm hoping it comes back maybe into another gameplay mode or anything else, because it was fun. It was a little bit more Counter-Strike-y as far as kind of like just kind of going through and people kind of popping out at you and everything else. But yeah, so when we were first working on the Conquest map, it was essentially a city that was laid out at the base of Mount Olympus that you were fighting through versus kind of the magical forest that it is now between the mountain and the volcano.
So one thing that you guys may know or may not know is that the Smite devs actually pay a lot of attention to what gets said on Reddit, the forums, Twitter. So can you guys talk a little bit about what's the coolest thing that you think has made its way into the game that came from the community?
That's a hard choice to make, because a lot of it is, it's almost 50-50. And realistically, people always say, oh, Hi-Rez doesn't respond on Reddit or on the forums or on Twitter. Some people think that we just don't pay attention. But the truth is, all of us, we read Reddit every single day through its entirety. And a lot of times we don't respond because, we may not want to, or it's not something that we should speak about or something like that. But, there's, over a dozen skins that were all community suggested ideas that we just kind of toss in there like, wow, that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Let's concept that. Let's build it. Let's put it in the game because that's really cool. And really, items, god balance, even some parts of the map as well. Yeah. Just, okay, people don't like this. Let's make this better. Or they do like this. Let's make this happen more often. And that happens every day, all day. And we, even specifically for me, I have two days out of the week, there's a community meeting in which we have our community managers write up reports. We sit down for about an hour and we talk about, what is this going on in the community? What are the concerns that people have right now and how do we address those? And then throughout the rest of the week, we'll have kind of follow-up meetings. How do we make the game fit their concerns? How do we make the game a little bit better for the people that are playing it right now? And so I would say we're definitely 100% pro community at this point. And some of the things that are just hilarious that come into it, the skins, some of the item names as well. And, even, I think Shinobalanke was also a community suggestion for the name of the Shibalanke skin. So stuff like that. We're always reading or always paying attention.
Yeah, I would say basically same stuff, like skins. We look at everything. So yeah, ideas on balance or abilities or how a god could maybe, sort of be interpreted into a kit. But skins are definitely one of the ones that really makes it through, because there's just so many great ideas, and you can kind of just capture it in a single word sometimes, or a picture somebody draws. So I would say it's probably got to be Poolseidon for me. Nice. He was our exclusive Smite release skin, and you could only get him at the time, and it's just really funny looking. I don't know. It's just got all these great ideas, and most of those came from the community. So yeah, keep it up.
Yeah, the community is definitely a big kind of thing that I think sets kind of Smite kind of apart. Being part of a service-based game versus like traditional console or other kind of games, it's just when you're putting out content every 2 weeks and when the community has that opportunity to kind of talk to devs almost in real time. As far as what they're working on, it makes a big difference. So, Rory's completely right. Like we lurk on Reddit and through Twitter and through everything else a lot, and we get a lot of great feedback. We've got some great members of the community that are really really good at breaking things down and providing good feedback and information and analysis of what's going on. But yeah, for me, it's definitely the stuff that comes to the art side. So I've gotten some great feedback on the maps, but I'd say probably my favorite is Pixel Buster Freya, which kind of started out as a fan image that kind of goes through. It's kind of a retro gaming theme. If you haven't seen it, it's amazing. And voice pack, everything just done really well. But it was actually a fan-made thing that inspired one of our concept artists that was on the team, saw it, and was so inspired by that, he made his fan image of that fan image, and then posted it online, and then we ended up picking it up, and we were like, yeah, we got to make that right away. Yeah. So it came out. I think it's an Odyssey skin, wasn't it? Yeah. It was. So, but that's probably my favorite, and that's what it is like, well, it's always gratifying, and it feels great to kind of inspire a community or inspire people with the work we put out and stuff. It works just as well in reverse. We've got some great people out there making some amazing video content and everything else, and it spreads through the office pretty fast. So actually, Thomas, I think, won an award or something at MomoCon, didn't he, for the whole Captain America style trailer? Yeah,
that trailer,
yeah. It was
really
won
cool.
best concept or whatever at this MomoCon. So, but yeah, one of the community guys made a video kind of trailer for Smite in the kind of style of the Winter Soldier credits. So it's all 2D graphics and everything else. We showed it at our World Championship in January, and it just won an award here at MomoCon. But yeah, the stuff like that's great. You see that, it spreads to the office, ends up, if it's a still image printed out and on our refrigerator in our kitchen.
Gets overflowed.
So it's been nice.
One thing I just thought of as well, and why I would encourage everyone to just be active and talking to the community and giving your feedback and thoughts is just recently in one of the last patches, I was actually reading through, I believe it was Reddit at the time, and someone was like, why does Uller stay disarmed when he switches weapons? And I was reading it, and I was like, they're two different weapons. He cleanses disarm now. And then we just put it in the game because someone makes a good comment, and we're like, okay, that's a great point. Sure. Yep. There it goes.
Yeah. So, when we're talking about like things that, sorry, completely forgot my question. But essentially, from start to finish, you guys on the design team work with a lot of different people in the office, a lot of different departments. From start to finish, exactly how many departments do you work with? Who do you talk with? How long does it take from start to finish to do one project or one god or that you worked on?
Specifically for gods, they usually take anywhere from 2 to 3 months at the longest. Some of them can be shorter depending on how things work out. As far as departments, there could be upwards of 3, 4, or 5. And people, there's a lot that people involved. And realistically, design, at least for us at Hi-Rez, is kind of a go-between between all of them. It's more of kind of just like the central point that everyone goes to is, how should this work? What is the intent on this? How do you want this to look? That kind of thing. And thankfully, we have a lot of very, very talented animators and artists that kind of bring all the flavor into it as far as, the colors and the scheming and the visuals. But really, a lot of it comes down to working with directors mostly, and then that kind of trickles down to, our slew of animators and riggers and modelers and artists and programmers. And specifically for gods, we have a habit of kind of putting, one designer and one programmer on lead for that god, right? So we'll say that, this designer and that programmer are working together to create this god. There will be backup that comes in through other programmers and other designers, and a lot of it comes as a team team effort, but it's also, this doesn't look right, this doesn't feel right. We have, one of our lead sound guys as well. Is this a good sound for what that should work? Is this a good tell, actually? A lot of it comes down to when a game design perspective, does this signify something is happening in a good way? Does it feel like, yes, this matches what we expect from the gameplay, and it's something that you can learn from? And so we're very concerned in game design about how players perceive the game, but also how can they learn the game and play the game. And we're kind of the central hub for making sure that the content that gets created for animation and for effects matches that whole holistic idea.
Right. Yeah, so I think of game design as kind of like the glue between all of these other parts. So you have like your engineers are like, making some cool stuff that's going to like make something happen in the game that's new that you don't have a tool for already, or like some ability or whatever. And they're working on that, but like in a vacuum, it's just, going to turn into like numbers and nobody's going to know what's happening. You need animation to represent that. You need effects to, kind of fill the arc that the slice covers, or, put the circle on the ground where the ability hits or whatever. And, character art to build the characters, obviously. So like all of that really is kind of like support to the sort of vision. And so game design is like right in the center of that vision. Like, what is the holistic feeling that you want to have when you're playing this character or this game or whatever, and then all the rest is kind of built out from that to kind of support it. And that's not to say it's not a one-way street. Like, there's a lot of feedback between those. So
Absolutely.
An animator's like, oh, I was thinking about like, what if we did this big, like he flips and then he comes down, and design's like, oh, cool, like, yeah, we could probably do that. That'd be really sweet. We maybe need to add a little more build-up time to it, but I think there's room for that, based on the play testing. And then effects is like, yeah, sweet, we'll get a big, arc to cover that, and he'll leave like little sparks along the way. And so it all like comes together through the design, though. So it's really like the central point that everything kind of feedbacks through.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. There's a lot of people on the team that are passionate about the project, obviously, and play quite a bit. And a lot of the stuff like, the God designs and stuff actually just start with brainstorming. And those ideas can come from all over, both on the art side for skins and those kind of elements to the actual God designs themselves. Level-wise, I would say we're typically pretty longer than the God cycles, but we're still kind of maybe about 4 to 5 months kind of thing. It kind of depends on the size of the map and kind of the changes that are going into it. And similar to the God pipeline, with the levels, it basically involves everybody. So there's a lot of early design and brainstorming and things going up, but there's also a ton of characters. So you're redoing all the NPCs. You've got the minions. You've got all the buff camps. You've got in case of Conquest, Fire Giant and Gold Fury. You've got the Titans. You've got Phoenixes, and then you've got towers, which you need to destroy and be animated. And then so there's a lot of coordination across all the groups, because as a map, it's not just one thing. It's not just a single package. It's almost like a game within itself, because each of our maps represent a game mode. And so kind of working on that, it's kind of nice, because you see that back and forth, and you see that kind of pulling together from all the groups.
So one thing that I've been asked repeatedly just at MomoCon so far this weekend is, when is X God going to get nerfed? When is X God going to get buffed? So in your own opinion...
Soon.
It's always soon. In your own opinion, is there a particular God that stands out that if you could retouch them or do something different to them, who would it be? Which God would it be, and why?
Wow.
They're all perfect.
Yeah,
though, right?
I mean, we're in the most balanced state ever.
If you change
It's really tough, actually, and I think what most people don't see on the other side of the veil is really what the game is, and perception plays, I would say 95% of what a game balance is, right? Because if a new strategy comes out that's particularly effective, it feels like that is the strongest thing in the game, but realistically, it just means you haven't figured out a counter for it yet. And way things feel versus the way they actually are, because we obviously we're a big studio. We have a lot of stats. We can see exactly how each individual god is performing in every category: kills, deaths per game, how many minions they kill, how many times they win, how well they do on each individual game mode, how well they do specifically with other characters on their team. So we have a very holistic view statistically of how things perform. And then we kind of meld that with how the community sees it, right? Everyone says, Bologna is a great example. Bologna, man, she's so strong. Why can she do all these things? Whereas we look in the back end, and sometimes we'll see there's actually most of the time we'll see there's kind of an incongruency there where, a character that everyone says, Sun Wukong is actually an excellent example because everyone says, man, Sun Wukong, worst character in the game. Why don't you buff him? He's so bad. And then we look and we see that, most people that play Sun Wukong are performing in the upward of 80%. They're very, very strong, very, very good. And most people that play him perform very well. So we kind of have this balancing act of, how is it perceived and how is it performing and how do we make that feel better? If there's a specific god that I would like to mention, probably going to be someone like, let's say a Wheelish. A Wheelish is one of those characters that we really meant to be, one of those characters that everyone could love, right? She's very friendly, she's very bubbly, she's very happy. But sometimes, and this happens a lot with game design, especially with character design, you make a character that is meant for, a specific type of player, and then you turn out that the complexity of the character is a little bit too high, right? And that's what had happen with a Wheelish. Her difficulty level is very, very high, right? You're talking about, for those of you familiar with her, very, very thin skill shots that have a long travel time, being able to grab people from the air, which is a very quick reaction. Being able to pop that ultimate and pull someone who is airborne is not something that's easy to do. And so she's probably one of the ones that I like to reference in that, if we could go back, we would make her a little bit easier, a little more accessible to people that would like to play her. Because sometimes you see a character's like, man, that's awesome. I want to play that. But it turns out that it's just way too hard to play, and that doesn't really fit.
Yeah, I think that's probably pretty accurate. I wouldn't have too much to add on top of that, like just generally around the process of it. I'd probably say, like, if I had to single someone out, maybe Naja, another one of those guys. It's like kind of same boat. You want him to be very friendly and accessible. He's basically all line targets, which are, with like delay and stuff. So it's very hard to actually use him in practice, but he can be very effective in the right circumstances. I would definitely think about like ways to kind of like keep the core of what's there, but maybe kind of spruce it up a little bit, just make it a little easier for people to use, a little more accessible. But yeah.
Yeah, I'd say, I guess the good answer is accessibility. But I play a lot of Arena, and I'll just give you my personal thing, which is Loki just needs to be nerfed. So he drives me nuts. So, but yeah, I play a lot of Hunters, so anything to help them out, I'm in favor of. But yeah, the general case is, it all depends on the situation. And so in Arena, it's a much different kind of battle plan and a way to counter a god or a way to deal with a god or how strong I think they are versus not. Than when I'm playing Assault or playing Conquest or Joust or anything. So it's really tough when you're dealing with that many gods and that many kind of team comps, and you're also dealing with people everywhere from like a professional level, which like just watching the esports is just ridiculous, like what they do and how they do it, down to like people just getting into the game. They're all playing the same gods, they're all playing kind of the same game modes. And that combination of number of gods versus number of game modes, I think is interesting because it's a holistic balance versus just a A to B comparison as far as going through. But yeah, nerf Loki.
Some of the interesting things that come out of it as well is kind of watching the community as a whole figure out how to play the game. This is it's very cyclical. There are times where the hunters are too strong, and then warriors are too strong, and then it just kind of goes around. And it's interesting watching some characters that get absolutely no changes made to them go through a full cycle. One of my favorite examples is Thor in 2013. Thor at his peak, the first part of 2013, was the most powerful jungler considered by the community across the board, and competitive as well. Everyone was playing Thor every single game, first pick, first ban material, and then towards the summer, he fell off, and there was no changes made to him, no itemization changes in his core, nothing really changed about him, but because the meta itself shifted, people just didn't want to play him anymore, and so he kind of fell off, no one was playing him at all, and again, with no more changes made to him, no changes to his core item set, he came back in towards the end of the year as the strongest jungler in the game. And so a lot of it's kind of just watching people figure out how to play the game better. And it's really interesting. You'll see this in almost any online competitive game. When people figure out a strategy and it's new, it's always going to do well. But then once it becomes the best strategy at the time, everyone's using it, and then it's all equal. But then someone finds a new strategy that counters that, and it just keeps going in a circle. And you have to really kind of constantly balance. And one of the reasons why we always put out so many updates and constantly are putting changes into the game, is we're really trying to pay attention to where that cycle is and how to inject into it to make sure it's always kind of healthily moving to a point where people feel like the game is different and exciting every time they play.
Okay, so I know a lot of people are wondering or just inquisitive about how, if you were to give advice to anyone to get into the game industry, what advice would you give them as far as like what's the best thing to do to prepare yourself or to get ready to be a game designer?
Probably the first thing, this goes with all professions, is figure out what you want to do. And some people look at game design, especially since it is still a little bit newer as far as the health of the industry and how big it's growing. And people assume, oh, well, you've got a game designer and then a guy who draws things, and that's not true. I mean, you have a very wide slew of professions you can get into. You can be an animator, you could be a rigger, and just specifically in a model standpoint, you have someone who concepts it and draws it on a 2D level. You have a modeler who comes in and actually creates a 3D version of that. Then you have a rigger, which what they do is they actually rig it up. If you think of scaffolding, they're actually putting on joints and actual bones and ways to actually move it so that they put something on the elbow so it can move. And then once you have all the pieces of the skeleton there, then you give it to an animator. And the animator takes all those joints and moves it around and makes it come to life. But at that point, you're still not done, right? Because when I swing a weapon, everyone knows things happen when you swing weapons, so you need an effects artist to come in and put explosions and lights and colors and really cool things onto everything that happens. And so just making a single character, you've got 5 or 6 different and very vast professions you can do on specifically that. And when you're talking about a business, you're talking about everything a business entails, right? You're talking about marketing. You're talking about community managers that come in and interact with the community. You're talking about website managers, web admins, people that build the products you see online. So really the first step would be deciding what you want to do. And then once you do that, just kind of figure out, how to get into it. I mean, there's a lot of different engines. As we mentioned, we're primarily Unreal 3. Unreal 4 is out. There's, a whole bunch of other things you can do, different platforms as well. So really get into it and figure out what the specific trades are for that profession and start learning it. You can go to school. You can learn at home. And one of my favorite things about the gaming industry, actually, is the fact that of many industries, it's one of the few that is solely driven by passion. A lot of times it's not, you're picking up this person because they want to do this thing. And really, and you'll see it from any one of these guys or anyone you see from Hi-Rez, we'll be at the office 14 hours a day through the weekend, working all the time because the game we're working on is the game we play and it's the game we love. And, when you find that passion, that's what you're looking for. So that would be the next step, is just kind of figure out, what do you like? Do you like MOBAs? Do you like shooters? Do you like drawing levels? I mean, once you figure that out, then you just hone in on it. And then the next step is showing that passion to someone, because a lot of people, especially Hi-Rez specifically, we find people that are passionate about the games and have a very big interest because you can teach people things. I mean, I'm a great example of that, right? I came in as someone who just have been playing MOBAs for over a decade. I love Smite more than probably anyone in the world. And then I came in and started, kind of talking to the company, networking, getting in on that. And then just over the 3 years that I've been working with Hi-Rez, part of it contract, part of it, full-time, was just, I'm really interested in this. I want to do that. I want to do that. I love this. I want to do that. And then you just, buy all the books and learn as much as you can and really show to the company that you're interested, because the industry is pretty small and you don't want someone who hates it, right? You're not gonna be like, man, I hate levels, but I'll be a level designer. And you don't want to work around that because it is very small, and so you want to work with people that love it as much as you do.
Yeah, I would say probably because the industry is so, like, it encompasses pretty much every skill set. Like, there are people who do art, there are people who do tech, there are people who market, people who are people interfaces, who just, like, manage. People come from all over, so yeah, you won't necessarily have a straight path in, but my biggest advice would just be work harder than the guy next to you in all cases, because that really, at the end of the day, it is a passion-based industry, and the people who are the most passionate are going to work the hardest, and those are the people that you want to bring into your company. When you're sitting in an interview with somebody else and they look like they might, if stuff got hot, they might drop the ball, you're not going to hire that guy if there's somebody else who's like, whatever it takes. So be the whatever it takes guy. And then also for, the younger people, you actually have a lot of opportunity these days to learn the skills that you need to get into the game industry before being in the industry. That's historically been one of the biggest catches of it. There's this catch-22 of, like, people want to hire people for game jobs who have made games before. if you've never made games before, you never get to make games. So how do you bridge that gap? The way to do it is to, while you're in school, or just even if you're out of school with your friends or whatever, find communities online. There are people who want to make games and who are making indie games every day, or who are making demos or prototypes. They have numerous communities on the art side, on the programming side, communities that bridge those things together. There's organizations like IGDA, International Game Developers Association, that have a lot of tools and resources. And then not to mention the actual software that you need is pretty much free these days. You can go download Unreal 4 right after this if you want, and you can start screwing around with it, and you can do one of their tutorials, and you can build a level this afternoon. And once you've done that, you built a level. And so then you try to build more levels. And once you build enough levels, you make a website that shows how you build levels, and then you apply. And the guy who applies that's yeah, I really want to make levels, and doesn't have that website, doesn't get the job. So work harder, use the tools that are available. The internet is an amazing thing. You can find everything you need on there.
Yeah, I'll echo that. That's generally my first step advice to the students and just to people in general is if you want to make games, start making games. There's lots of stuff out there as far as game jams, there's forums, there's a lot of people that have gotten into the industry through the mod community. And it's that passion, work hard. And I'll add to that as well, while it is a passionate thing, and I get this all the time on the artist side, I self-identify as an artist, but the truth is when I'm in the office, I'm a craftsman. And that's the same for design, and it's the same for the other people in it. While it is passion, while it is something that kind of drives us as individuals, even outside of the paycheck and even outside of our job, we're still professionals, and part of that is being the craftsman. And where I kind of separate that is you still have to solve the problem. I'm not looking to kind of showcase my emotional state through my art on a day-to-day basis. I try to put part of me in everything I do, but it is a craft, and what that means is you've got to study your craft. You've got to become a better craftsman, and the people I see succeed, the people I see get into this industry, are the people that study. They study hard. They cram hard. Like their life depends on it. And there's a lot of resources out there. And even once you're in, it never stops. You're constantly pushing to become better, to learn more, to widen your skill set, and to kind of go further. And that's actually one of the things I love from this industry is not only do you have those passionate people and those people that drive, which then drives you to get better and better and better, but they do come from all walks of life. One of the better designers I know, I think he's working on Call of Duty now and stuff like that, started out as a sewing machine repair guy in Poland. And that was his career at the time, and kind of found his way in. So we have an art historian that's now one of our designers, which is working really great for Smite. So it doesn't kind of matter what the background is, and it's awesome because all of these people bring different knowledge and different experiences and different kind of viewpoints into it. But the thing that links them is that passion, is that work ethic, and that drive to kind of make something together that's better.
Also, just to echo a little bit of what Coleman was talking about earlier, really, if you look at most of the common games now, a lot of them started as mods, right? Smite was a great example. Counter-Strike was a mod. Dota, actually, which originally started the whole genre of MOBAs, was a mod for Warcraft. And so when you're talking about people that are really interested, we're all just one big group, right? We all play games, and we play games for one reason. We want to have fun, and that's really what it is. On a day-to-day basis, especially as designers, we're like, man, what's fun? Let's find something fun. And once we find something fun, then we bring in a whole slew of professionals to come in and make it look better once it's fun. But that's really what it comes down to. So I wouldn't really be so held back by the fact that, man, I don't have the skills yet, or I'm not in the industry. I don't really know anyone in the industry. I don't know really where to start. Find something that you like doing, get into it, and just start making it. He's exactly right. All the tools are available online. You can buy books, you can read tutorials, you can talk to anyone that has the skill set, and they'll be happy to teach you. And then once you start that, just start following it, and you'd be surprised how fast you grow at that rate.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. Can we get a hand for these guys for the panel? We do still have a little bit of time left. I'd like to open it up at this point for a Q&A. So if anyone has a question about design, about Smite in general, Hi-Rez Studios, please come up to the microphone, and we'll try to get as many out as we can.
Couple questions. First off, you spoke about balance earlier. What is the largest common denominator for you when you were balancing? Is it the 2% of the competitive players who are in Diamond, Masters, professional players? I'm personally a Masters player, and when I see things like Janus, who is currently one of the most, this is way back when, one of the best performing gods, he's getting a buff because his performance in the casual pre-level 30 demographic isn't good enough. Where do you guys look to balance from?
So we look at all angles, really. And so we kind of just we're banging on all cylinders when we look at it. But if I were to pick one central focus, it's probably around platinum level. So what we like to do is we look at a certain level and a certain play style, players are able to perform the needed tasks and combos, and also have a good grasp and understanding of the items, direction of the game mode, and also how to work together as a team. And right when you hit that certain threshold, it's around where we look. So we say, if someone who is competent and able to play and not going to make consistent mistakes, which happens all the time. I make mistakes probably more than anyone, but we try to look at someone who's able to perform everything to how we expect, how the character is supposed to be played, and then we balance around that. So I wouldn't say we really ever make too many decisions around the highest level, the 2%, right? But we do keep it in mind, right? Something that's actually a fantastic example of this was Ao Guang right before the SWC. Ao Guang was a character that across the board was performing quite poorly, actually. He's a very difficult character, someone that is very difficult to grasp for most players. And so, a low mobility, melee, squishy assassin that has to get in and poke people with his sword, that's not easy to do if you're your average player. But going into SWC was something that was quite rampant in competitive play, and also something that every competitive team was picking up, and something that really was detracting from the viewership value of watching a tournament. And so he ended up getting a nerf, even though holistically he was performing quite poorly. So we do things on kind of an ad hoc basis, but I would say probably the more accurate mark would be around platinum. We say this person can perform all the needed tasks of this character. Is he overperforming or underperforming?
The other question that I have is, the game is currently extremely snowbally. A lot of people have talked about the fact, a lot of pro players have talked about the fact that the game can often be decided before the 10-minute mark. In fact, some people say it is decided as early as a 3-minute Harpies, if not sometimes a 6-minute Harpies. Heartseeker came back, and Heartseeker's adding to the snowball meta, and it's just such an early game-centric meta. That's why you don't see gods like Scylla on the rise. That's why it's Neith on her. You're seeing Poseidon. You're seeing just whoever can dominate and get that little bit of lead early. That's fine. I have seen a lot of people complain about that. In my head, that's the way the game's played. Are you guys looking for, when you guys go to shift the meta, when you guys go to create a new meta game, do you guys go, I want it to be an early game, I don't care if it's early game, we'll just create this and see where it goes, and if something's not balanced, we'll try to fix it? Do you guys actually have a vision or a direction when you did it? When you buffed Heartseeker, what was your thought process behind, this is snowbally, let's make it more snowbally?
So part of it, we do have a vision, right? And
Yes.
that vision is definitely, we want the game to be able to be played at any stage, and to be kind of equal. So everyone who wants to play a specific way can play that way. And there are pros and cons to every different way that you play. As far as, the vision currently, the Season 2 vision, of course, is strategic diversity. And so what we're trying to do is widen that breadth of what you can play, the team comps you can play, and also the items you can pick up while doing so. One of the few reasons why we added so many items in Season 2. The price drop on Heartseeker specifically, and the +5 physical power added to that as well, was more that we like seeing the high risk, high reward kind of play styles. Those are exciting to watch, and something that we always like watching, the Doom Orbs and then the Heartseekers of the game. And something that we're always looking at, where we're looking at feedback from the professional players. We actually have, some of our esports teams will go out and kind of poll from them and bring back results and bring it to us. Same thing from our community managers. We'll go to the community, and we like to hear from everyone about how things are going. And a lot of it, too, is changes that came out of Season 2 going into it. I know a lot of people are saying right now we're in a Hunter-Guardian meta, how the fact that Hunters are very powerful and can be played everywhere. And it comes back to a little bit the perception as well, since we've had Hunters in the mid and solo lane before. This is nothing new in Smite, but obviously with the more low-cost items, they're able to kind of use that to its highest effect. And a lot of it, too, when you first, like I said earlier, when you see a new strategy emerge, there's usually a good buffer period or grace period before people figure out how to counter it, where it feels like there is no counter to it. So what we like to watch and kind of see how things evolve. How do people react to this strategy, and how can we inject into it? And of course, we never want the game to be too much early game or too much late game or too much mid game. We want a kind of good, blend between the three, and also allow people to build strategies around 1, 2, or 3, and then be able to counter those with other strategies. And so one thing that we're looking at right now, which we're kind of gearing up for some more balance changes coming in, and probably following this next SPL split, but just looking to kind of shift that around a little bit and kind of pay attention to how things are being played and make it a little bit easier to play around.
Thank you.
Okay. This is mostly for Coleman, something you said really early on. You mentioned you first started, you were born into video games like probably all of us, and you first really realized that people made a living off of it in middle school, and in high school you kind of looked into it, and maybe university you started really building your understanding of how to work within engines or different software and whatnot, and then you got internships and whatnot, and all that, and now you're here. Right. We did the exact same thing, the twin over there. Okay. We started off in middle school. We got really excited. We're like, oh, people actually make these. How do we get to do that? And over the course of high school and now university, we've been trying to learn everything we can on our own and build our own stuff. Rory, I could be getting this wrong, but the surname Followell might mean something to you. We had our roommate send you a little side project we made last year.
Yeah, I remember.
He said you had good things to say. I wasn't part of that conversation, but. And we know that you guys currently, or at least Hi-Rez, has a internship going on right now.
Yes.
We applied, didn't make it. So next year, what are you guys looking for in order to get into that internship? What do we need to work on?
Are you looking for design specifically, or what?
Yeah, we applied for a couple of them. So like QA was one, and we also did environment design, or level design or whatever.
So for level designs, I would say actually just levels is like the most important thing. So I actually began as a level designer originally, because it's really hard to kind of get into just design.
Yeah,
because it's this like kind of nebulous thing.
It means a lot of things.
There's not really like a hard skill that can easily just be identified. It's not like character art where there's just like there's the guy who makes the characters that look better than everyone else's, and that's the guy you want. And even then, it's not quite that simple even for that. There's different fields of that, but. For design, like if you want to just be a game designer someday, I think level design is a great tangible path to get there.
Okay.
Because it's the sort of the plate that the dinner is served on, and it has to be there, and it has to be the right size, and is it a cold plate or a warm plate? Like that all ties in all the dynamics of the plate. But basically it's if you can make a few levels and show that like you understand the gameplay that you're going for, and I would say make them for a specific game. Like again, modding is a great way to do that. Then you can actually even play it and test it out. Or even if it's a game that's not made yet, if you submit a portfolio that shows level design, show your thought processes, show that you're able to think through like, why is this choke point here? It's because this is the place where side A and side B come together, and they're fighting over control of the map, and this is like the bypass route through that or whatever. So level design, I think, very good place to get into game design because it worked for me. And then show process, build a few levels. It doesn't even have to be, you don't have to show that you're a great artist even necessarily for that, because there's a difference between level design and environment art. And so Thomas is more on the environment art side. You have to understand level design because you have to be able to meet those needs. And then level design is more just like, is the layout cool? And is there some sort of context that ties it together? And that can work with the artist. But, I think level design is probably your best bet for design. And then just build make a portfolio that shows like some screenshots or maybe a fly through, and describe your thoughts for it. And that's really like what we're looking for.
All right, and then I guess a part two to that was we, like, for the little project that we made, brother and I, we did all of the art, so the modeling, the environment art, and the texturing, and blah, 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 all that stuff, and the roommate did programming. So we worked within Maya and then within Unreal 3. I know you mentioned Unreal 3 earlier, and now Unreal 4 is out for free or whatever. Is there any other software specifically that you would recommend other than the engine? That
design?
would probably be more, I guess, Thomas.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
would
I was
choose the
about to
art
say,
aspect.
so like, I mean, my advice toward it, so we do have an internship program that we have quite a few people, actually quite a few interns now in this studio this year, and hopefully we'll continue to build. It's really competitive.
Yeah.
You know, for each position, I mean, we got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applicants as far as going through. My advice is very much the same as far as like, it kind of goes back to the same of how do you get in the industry, which is just to do it. There's two specific things I would offer just to kind of add on, like as far as especially for level design or art or anything else is one is just be careful of scope. It's the thing I made a huge mistake with constantly as a student and even still today. But it's just like, you know, it's better to keep the scope of what you're trying to accomplish small so that you actually have time to iterate and polish and make sure it's there and focus toward the quality of it than it is to try to like do it all and solve it all as far as going through. And then the other thing is if you're targeting a specific company, use the software that they are. So the fact that you're making your levels in Unreal is a good first start. Having a basic knowledge of, you know, even down to like, you know, version control software like Perforce or GitHub or something like that also helps. Basically, anything you can do or show that showcases a skill or a knowledge or some level of experience with either the tools we use or the process that we're in or how game development is an added edge, because that's one less thing that we have to kind of like teach you from scratch or explain from scratch as far as stepping in. And interns, you know, obviously fully supported. You know, a lot of us came through it. We're very passionate about like getting new people into the industry, but you're coming right into an actual development environment.
Yeah.
And so the faster you can kind of show yourself, prove yourself to be plug and play, and basically this is somebody that, you know, with a little bit of coaching can kind of step in and start contributing right away, the better shot you're going to get at getting any internship.
All right, awesome, thank you.
And I would just add real quick, we're almost out of time, but just because this is probably something that applies to a lot of people in here, it's better, like on the topic of scope, when you're building something, like if you're making a whole game and doing all the effects and everything yourself, it's going to be way more efficient and more effective when I see it on the, you know, coming through Recruiter Box or whatever. Yep. If you make something small that is really self-contained and awesome, that's going to be way better than like, I started an MMO, check it out, here's a block in for the first zone, and we still got to work on quests, you know, they're not there yet. Like, hand-wavingness is not really good in any kind of, you know, professional kind of application kind of context, so keep it small, keep it tight, and just, yeah, rein in the scope and just knock it out of the park.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Sweet.
Thanks.
Hey, so I was wondering with like the release of Ao Kuang and his changes, there's a bit more like characters who have invisibility and things like that. Are you guys working on anything to, you know, deal with invisibility, like make them visible with sentry wards or maybe a sound or particle effect that just makes it like not visible, but just you can kind of at least guess where they're going?
Really, it depends on the character, actually. Some characters have more tells than you would see on first pass. For example, Loki, you can actually hear his footsteps when you're moving through. And it does depend on the character and the balance of that character specifically. And something that really works well is sentries, obviously, will reveal those. We have characters like Hu Yi, where you can mark someone, and if they go stealth, you'll still be able to see them. So really, as a holistic thing, I wouldn't say right now we're working on anything specifically to make them show differently, but that doesn't say that there might be a character in the future that, you know, it makes sense for his kit that he has some kind of shimmer, right, on him. That really makes sense for him specifically.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Just a quick question. What happened to 10-person arena, like 10v10?
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I love
It
the
was
shirt
in
though.
that trailer a little bit ago. Nothing? Okay. Then what about New Nox? That was kind of mentioned. The Nox rekit.
The night falls. She's coming.
Okay.
Watch the stream.
That's right.
So you're talking about making your own indie games and such. I'm an animator primarily, and any coding that I know comes from the Flash coding that I learned in class. Do you know, is that still a viable code to work with, or is there something new in the industry that's come along that's taken prominence?
Over Flash? you're
Yeah.
talking about? So it depends what you want to do. So if you want to be an animator on a game like Smite, you should learn probably 3D Studio Max. That's what we use. That's our primary animation tool.
What
Flash-
about Bender? Do you still use that, or do you?
No, I mean from an animation standpoint, I mean the industry standards for your typical 3D, kind of AAA kind of games is going to be Maya and 3D Studio Max, and understanding the animation and the pipelines around that. As far as toward 2D or toward mobile and stuff, there's actually still quite a bit of Flash development that's happening, even if the end product's not in Flash. A lot of the actual content creation is still kind of going through that or very similar kind of programs. I would say it really does come down to just the fundamentals again, as far as when to look to hire kind of an animator. And one of the things I'd look at, and again, great resources online if you're in a school or anything like that, there's generally things, is the same thing I tell modelers, which is, as soon as possible, find somebody who is amazing at lighting and make them your best friend. Trying to be good at everything to showcase a portfolio and be like, oh, I rigged this, and then I animated this, and I modeled this, and I did the effects for this. You can't be the best at all of those things. And anything that you do that's not at the same caliber as your highest quality stuff is just going to detract from it. And so as soon as possible, getting out of that early student mindset of I've got to do it all because it's my vision or my project, or I want to show that I can do all the things, and instead concentrate on what you can actually do or what you want to do. I'm not saying don't know that stuff or have a general knowledge of it or have some experience with it, but where you're focusing of what you're delivering as far as portfolio content, there's lots of other people that are diehards for all of those other elements that will rig for you, that will light for you, that will do the programming and the processing and the other kind of elements. And so finding other passionate people where your skill sets complement each other to create like high quality across the board work generally tends to pay off a lot better as far as portfolio, as far as showcasing what you do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So are we going to see Ranked Arena come back?
I'll pass this to you.
So yeah, it really comes down to the mode itself, but most likely not. And the same question to the 10v10 arena, most likely not. And really, it's just we saw that the majority of the people that were playing arena were playing regular arena. Same reason for the joust, right? We had the ranked joust and joust 1v1. We found out that a majority of the people were playing ranked joust, and just to improve the experience overall of that specific game mode, we condensed it down so that everyone was on the same pool, so that everyone would have a better chance of getting a better match made, and also being able to have lower queue times and everything in that realm. So no.
Okay, mine's not game related.
Sure.
Sort of, exactly. It's on the statistics, and you were talking about the tells, right? So, I work for a big company, so we measure like people coming into the website, and they hit here and then they go there. So, how do you guys measure a tell? Do you have like, oh, here's a tell for a character, and then I expect to see within X amount of time other characters react with something I viewed as a counter, and you build a measure for that, and you total up.
So like in real time, like how do we
how do you tell
for
if the tells are working, basically, or how do you statistically measure that out, or do you just ask people?
There's kind of just like a range of feel that just feels right for it. So like most of our tells for almost every ability, like even our basic attacks in Smite are not instantaneous. So like when you are using something, what's going to feel really good is like responsiveness. So like if you're playing a character that shoots a bow and you release the arrow, you kind of want like when you click it, the arrow comes out as soon as possible. That actually is what feels the best technically from the user. And that actually feels the worst for the guy on the other end of the arrow because he has no time at all for that. So there's kind of just like a range that's based on kind of human response time, and it's generally about 0.2 seconds to about 1.5 or so, and then sometimes you get the really big like Scylla ult type things that have like maybe a little more build up than that. I don't remember what her actual timing is, but it's probably 1.5 plus. But yeah, it's kind of just like there's kind of a feel good range in there, and it just kind of comes out in play testing, and
So let's just talk to people and watch them in a room and see how they're reacting.
We do a little bit of that, a little bit of what's working, a little bit of you're also kind of balancing like what's the effectiveness of it for the tell. So you can get away with faster stuff if it's like you throw a shuriken, but if it's like you're throwing a tree branch at somebody or like a something giant that you expect to crush them, then you need to have all that weight to it. And also you kind of expect that when you're doing that, if it's something that looks like it should have weight, it should feel like it has weight. and the only way you make it feel like it has weight is it has momentum, and that's longer tell, kind of like more build up to it.
Yeah,
So it's really a feel, and you're balancing animations and effects, and if that sort of visual language comes together and represents the time that's there, it's probably going to feel good, even if it is a little weak or strong or a little fast or slow or whatever. So part of it is just the art supporting that feel and getting that that sense of momentum.
Yeah, for the evaluation, like I said, we play test like multiple times a day and kind of go through, and it does basically come down to that, is how did the people playing the god, how did the people playing against the god kind of feel?
Well enough for you to react
right.
to it? Okay.
But on the art side, though, that is like, we mentioned earlier, as far as the god pipeline and as far as dealing with characters, like that is a large part of the back and forth between the disciplines, is a lot of that responsibility for making sure that the character has the personality that they're supposed to have, that the attack has the weight and the feel that it's supposed to have, along with the fact that it's like you get a chance as the opponent to kind of read that it's coming and make your choice to it, but it also feels good from your side, falls to art. And so there's a lot of back and forth that kind of balances that. And honestly, like, we just try a lot of stuff sometimes, and sometimes it's moving numbers in a spreadsheet, making it a little faster, making it a little slower. Sometimes it's us having to change things completely on the art side to kind of get more oomph and stuff around it. But we do a lot of metrics as well, like the other aspect of it, as far as like looking at numbers and everything else, but that's usually for larger scale design and kind of balance kind of issues of how things are doing in the community.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily in the...
That's where you're talking about this character is not working out well because...
Right. How they're playing, how people are tending as a large population to play the game.
I was just wondering, from a code level, how do you measure this amount of time
Yeah,
somebody
it's a little
reacts?
not that
amorphous.
precise.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
precise.
It's a little amorphous,
Yeah.
actually. And a lot of it, some of it's experience, too. I mean, the more times you look at something, you feel it is. But probably the best way to look at it, actually, is if you don't notice, it's accurate, right? If you don't notice the difference, and that's the point, it should blend in. If you have someone who's shooting a bow and arrow, like he was mentioning, and it's like this real, and he lets it go, and it's like a slow-moving thing, it doesn't feel good, right? You'll notice right away. But if it's accurate, it'll feel good, and you don't really pay any attention to it. And that's kind of what we're looking for. But it's also a little bit of a scale of the strength too. Someone like Scylla's Ultimate is a great example, because if this is going to hit me for 1,600 damage, it probably shouldn't be instant. And if you guys actually imagined a game where everyone's targeter was like Nemesis's ult, right, where it's just instant hit someone, no travel or lead up or anything.
Well, and that
like
was the original problem you were talking about, with like a long-range weapon that could...
Exactly.
Right.
That's
Right.
why we moved away from sci-fi when we became Smite.
That's right.
Is
Okay.
a gun that's already ready to go. There's no way you're gonna dodge that. It's just not gonna happen. And if you don't have a jetpack or something where it's just the difficulty of hitting a moving target, and you're just a guy on the ground, and you kind of have a movement speed that's also kind of gated by what feels good and kind of human reaction time and everything, then it's a skill shot.
So I was just curious how
balance.
the...
It's from the gut.
Cool. Thank you guys so much. That is all of our time. Thank you for coming. Thank you guys for answering these questions.
No problem. Thank you.